Are you struggling to write the literature review to your research paper? Well, in this video, I'm going to walk you through step by step how I go about structuring and writing my literature review. And we're really going to simplify it for you so that after watching this video, you can go off and probably in one day structure everything and write everything. It really doesn't have to be that complicated to write the literature review. I know a lot of people struggle with it, but this video is going to show you how to do it more simply so that you can go off, finish the literature review and submit your paper. So let's dive in. Now, if you're new here, my name is Marek Kiczkowek and I run Academic English Now, where I help PhD students and researchers regularly publish research papers in top journals in the field. And if you're enjoying this video, then hit the like button and the subscribe button so you don't miss future videos like that. Alright, so what we're gonna do is work backwards from, a published paper and from a title of a published paper to show you sort of the steps that you need to go through in order to structure a literature review in a research paper. And by the way, the same thing would apply to a PhD thesis. It's just that it would be much longer, right? And you might be thinking, okay, but I'm still writing the paper. I don't have the paper published, right? Well, it's the same thing. You're just looking at your aim, right? So you want to copy and paste the aim of your paper as the first thing. In here, I'm just going to use the title of the paper, but you can use the aim of your paper because surely you already know what the aim is, right? And we're going to start working from the aim. Now, the easiest way to organize your literature review and write it in literally one day is to look at the main topics that are within your title or within the aim of your study, right? So I'm going to list all the main topics below the title, and we're going to try to organize the literature review around these topics, right? And for the time being, I'm just going to list them in no particular order, just as they come up in the title or in your aim, right? And I'll just then try to organize them. But first, I'm just going to list the titles, right? So that would be the first one. Of course, I could list them separately, right? And first talk about this concept of native speakerism and then English language teaching. But that would be too general. We want to dive in straight into this, right? Then we've got, these native speakers in here as well. Let me copy and paste that, right? So that would be our second main concept, right? And then we've got conferences, right? And plenary speakers, right? So I'll just copy and paste that. These could be two separate topics. So again, you could talk about conferences and the importance of conferences, and then you could talk about plenary speakers, right? And that's probably what I'm going to do. But these would be the main topics. I don't really need to talk about anything else, I think, in here, right? So the first step to organize your literature review is just to list all the topics based off the aim of your research paper or based off the title if you already invented the title, right? Now that we've got the main topics, we've kind of got to think what is the most logical way of organizing them, right? What should I talk about first in the literature review and what should I talk about second? Now, how do you do that? The easiest way, and usually the most logical, is to go general to specific. Now, I can't really talk about conferences and plenary speakers first because conferences and plenary speakers aren't really the main driving force of my topic. The main driving force of my topic is this, right? Native speakerism in English language teaching. That's the main driving force, right? So it wouldn't make sense to talk about conferences and plenary speakers. Conferences and plenary speakers are kind of a subtopic, a more specific aspect of this issue of native speakerism, right? If that makes sense. So what we're going to do is we're going to probably talk about this first, right? And then we would want to talk about conferences, and I think we're going to talk about conference plenary speakers as one topic. Now, what do we do with this, native speakers, right? So this perhaps requires a little bit of knowledge of the topic, but it's very simple, really. So native speakerism, you can kind of compare it to, like, let's say, sexism or racism. The main difference is that, unlike racism, which is based on, someone's perceived belonging to a given perceived race and all the, discrimination and negative stereotypes that go with that, native speakerism is based off on or someone's belonging to, someone being perceived as a native speaker of a given language, right? And all the discrimination, prejudices based with that when it comes to teaching English. And native speakers are often seen as better teachers, better models of the language, better everything, right? So this is kind of, do we talk about this first or do we talk about it within native speakerism? Well, probably I might need to first kind of address this issue of kind of who a native speaker is, in order to be able to talk about the issue of discrimination, which is native speakerism, right? Now, once you've got these main topics, right, you want to list some subtopics. In other words, like, what kind of stuff am I going to talk about? Well, I probably need a definition, right? Almost whatever you talk about, right, you need some sort of a definition. Right? In here, we need to talk about, like, previous studies, effect, for example, of native speakerism, reasons for it, right? Maybe, right? I'm just kind of brainstorming right now, but you get my point, right? You want to list, like, sort of subtopics that you're going to be talking about under each main topic, right? Now, one thing that people get wrong is that they say, well, but I can't review any literature because, like, my topic is very unique and no studies have been conducted on it. Well, that's true, because that's the reason why you're doing your topic, because it hasn't been done before. But, like, what you want to do is, like, be looking at the broader picture a little bit. So in my specific case, nobody has talked about, native speakerism when it comes to conference plenary speakers. This has not been done before, right? So what I need to do here is I need to, look at representation of, women, people of color at conferences, right? And I could look at conferences in general, but also as plenary speakers, right? And then I want to look at other disciplines because no research in English language teaching, right? Right? So if there's no research on this specific topic in your field, well, that's amazing, because you found, like, a huge research gap that you can research forever, basically, right? But you want to be looking at this topic of, like, conference plenary speakers, and, I'm looking broadly speaking at discrimination of a particular group of people, right? So you can do the same and, look at discrimination of other groups of people at conferences and as plenary speakers in other disciplines, right? Such as, I don't know, mathematics or physics or whatever else it is, right? And then afterwards, that brings you, we're going to add it maybe as our point number 4, research gap plus aim, right? That's always comes the last, right? So the whole literature review builds to this, right? Now, let's look at how this was actually done in this paper, and we're gonna move down to the literature review, right? And you can say, that first we've got the concept of a native speaker, right? And we provide the definitions in here. Now, the thing is that this section is a little bit long when it comes to who a native speaker is, because it's a fairly contentious issue, right? So if you've got a topic like that where, like, lots of researchers disagree how to, for example, define it, right? And there is no consensus, then you might want to spend a little bit more time discussing it, because for our study, it raises important issues in terms of the methodology, right? Because what we did was to investigate the balance of plenary speakers with the goal of whether there was disparity along the lines of speakerhood, right? So we would basically kind of look at how many native and non-native speakers there were at the conference. But first we have to define it. But if people disagree in our field how to define a native speaker, well, then we need to present that disagreement, right? In order to then be able to have a definition that is working and we can use in our study. And then we move on to the concept of native speakerism and conference speaker representation, right? So first, as almost always, you need to define the concept, right? And then we present the past research on this topic. So basically, you know, the effect of native speakerism on English language teaching, right? And then, you know, notice this sentence. There is no research basically on native speakerism and conferences, right? Or just like, there's almost none, or none, literally, right? So what we do here is what I told you when we were structuring it. Well, we're just gonna look at discrimination and bias at other conferences, right? We look at surgical conferences, you know, and there's a lot about imbalance when it comes to females of plenary speakers, right? And people of color and so on, right? So we also look at ethnic minorities among conference plenary speakers. But notice that, you know, we can't look at native and non-native speakers, and we can't look at conferences in English language teaching because there is no research on it, right? So we want to look at, you know, the broader issue of discrimination and conferences in other scientific disciplines, right? If that makes sense, to kind of expand our literature review. We look at, you know, the reasons for this discrimination, right, at conferences, right, and any potential explanations why this happens, right? And then we move on to the research gap, and then the aim of this paper, right, if that makes sense. So to sum up, you know, the way to structure your literature review and write it in literally like one day or a couple of hours is to look at the main topics of your research aim or of your title, write them down, put them in the most logical order, and then list any subtopics, and then put them in the most logical order, right? And then start writing. Now, if you'd want some more personalized help publishing research papers in higher impact journals, then schedule a free one-to-one consultation where we're going to identify your main challenges, what your goals are, and then prepare a personalized action plan for you that will help you to achieve those goals. And the link to book that free one-to-one consultation is right below this video.